Hi, I'm Anuradha SenGupta. You're watching the Media Dialogues. Although content across genres and distribution platforms has sustained us over the past year, like other industries, media and entertainment has also shrunk by 24% according to the latest annual FICCI Frames industry report. As we come off the peak of the catastrophic second wave of COVID-19, at least in the big cities, and we take tentative steps to unlock, the entertainment industry, especially production companies, are looking to make up for lost time. To get a sense of what's at stake and how the output, morale and viability of this creative business has been impacted, let's talk to Siddharth Roy Kapur. He's the founder and managing director of Roy Kapur Films, and he's also president of the Producers Guild of India. And Sameer Nair, veteran of the TV industry associated with iconic television shows and now CEO of Applause Entertainment that's just created that big hit Scam. Gentlemen, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've been keeping well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
So, give us a sense of the mood in the film industry, and by mood I mean how people are feeling and what kind of business has been conducted since the second wave hit us.
You know, considering all that's been happening around us, I guess the film industry, of course, has been affected quite severely. But when we look at what's going on in terms of the lives lost, in terms of the losses, the film industry is experiencing exactly what I think the rest of the country is experiencing as well. Yes. Unfortunately, what has happened with our industry is that with cinemas being shut for sustained periods of time, the loss of employment, the fact that so many single screens across the country have not been able to sustain themselves and unfortunately might not reopen. Those are long-term impacts that are going to be felt across the board. The hope, of course, that we're all holding out, and because we are meant to be entertainers and meant to be optimistic about things, is that like with most crises that occur, what happens after is a boom and things come back to normalcy. In fact, they go the other way. I mean, the pendulum swings the other way. Everyone talks about the roaring 20s in the last century. And we're hoping that, once we're over this bump, the roaring 20s come back for the film industry as well. So that's really what is sustaining us as we go forward. What I'm really heartened by is that the industry's come together, in a very sustained way over the last few months to be able to conduct vaccination drives for both, production companies as well as all the workers across the federations in the industry, because that's what's going to get us back on our feet. Right. So while things look weak right now, we're pretty hopeful about the future.
Okay. Sameer, what has it been like for you between the last year and this year? So between the unlock that happened in 2020 and this year when the unlock was, when the lockdown started again in April, what was the nature of business? What were the productions in the pipeline? In what kind of phases were they at when they were paused?
Well, like last year, coming off the lockdown from last year, and in fact, even from the first wave of COVID last year, is I think for everyone, it was, pretty much of an unknown at the time. No one really knew what was happening. The virus arrived, and the lockdown happened, and everyone was sort of groping and grasping at, the straws, that, okay, now it's going to reopen 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, and we almost spent 6 months doing that. And then, relatively speaking, India had a reasonably, lighter first
Wave
pandemic.
One, yes.
And I think when it sort of opened up in September, we all got back to work, and like everyone else in this country, we believed that we had sort of escaped and that nothing would happen to us. So there was a sort of a resurgence of work and, restarting of work, production, starting new shows, doing new activities across the board, whether it was TV, film, series, anything, including the IPL, if you see.
Yes.
The IPL also started. So I think the second wave, what it's done is that it's sort of, been a little more ferocious and it's been harder. In a sense, the virus is at the door. All through last year, we didn't really, there were many cases where we didn't know of people who we knew who got it or who succumbed to it.
It's almost like the last year, like you said, we had no idea what hit us and it was a shock. This year it is sorrow, I think, and shock. It's sort of, everything has got compounded.
And it's all right here with us now. And the worst part, I guess, is that now we know. So like from last year, which we didn't know, to this year we know. So now the second wave is more ferocious, it's more virulent, and we know the impact of it. And we know of people who've taken the first vaccine and still got it. So, I mean, it's a bit of more of a mixed bag. So the way we had a whole bunch of series in production, all of which had to stop, when the lockdown happened again. So I guess the reopening and the getting back to work is a bit more cautious, a bit more sensible, if you will. I guess,
as compared to September last year.
Yeah, definitely. Because September last year, we believed, like everyone else, we also believed our own infallibility. We believed that, we'd beaten the virus and that, India somehow is special. Maybe got to do with all the lack of hygiene in India and our strong immunization that, nothing is going to happen to us. So we did believe that, like everyone else. And so this time around, I think there's a lot more caution, a lot more planning. You got to think it through because, this is a really expensive business. So the start and stopping of productions and shoots is not, it's not as simple as switching on and switching off.
Siddharth, let me ask you to give us a sense of whether the protocols that were introduced to filmmaking and productions that came in last year, this year, will they continue in the same way, or will vaccination really have to be 100% for everybody who's on board when they are filming? Because, the negative test no longer seems to be enough, especially now in the face of this very ferocious, like Sameer said, Delta variant.
I think it'll have to be a combination of both. Now that vaccines are going to be hopefully more freely available, and the fact that we as an industry are trying to actually inoculate everyone, trying to institute at some point of time some sort of a protocol where people have got at least one jab or both jabs, hopefully, and then they can start resuming work, number one. And number two, just maintaining the same protocols that we had last year, because I think the SOPs that we put in place were pretty good. But like Sameer said, after a certain point, you do tend to believe that if nothing's happened so far, nothing will happen in the future, and people can let their guard down, which I think happened both in our industry as well as everywhere else.
Also, this concept of the bio bubble that you need to work in, really, how ready are we as a society, as an industry, to really stringently implement the rules of a bio bubble? We saw what happened to the IPL here, right? Last year in the UAE, they managed to keep that bio bubble secure. Here they didn't. I mean, I hate sounding like India can't do it, but in this case where bio bubbles and stuff like that are concerned, do you really think we have a long way to go in being able to, ensure they are safe?
I don't know whether it's an India thing at all. I think it's a human thing, because to have people kept in quarantine for that long and expecting them not to venture out in any shape or form, meet their loved ones, just go out and, maybe just break the bubble because they believe that 5 minutes here or there is not going to affect them is very hard. When you're shooting in Bombay, especially, it's virtually impossible because the costs are exorbitant, very hard to keep everyone in one place. Their friends and their families are around them, so therefore the temptation to break the bubble is that much harder. I think what we found last year was there were quite a few shoots that happened outside of Bombay where bio bubbles were maintained, and there have been quite a few where, the whole crew came back with not one case. But as, like I said, as the months went by and maybe protocols softened a little bit, you heard of more and more cases on sets, and it became almost par for the course at one point of time. You just shut down for a few days and then restart again. But again, this time with what we've just experienced over the last 2 months, I think people are definitely going to be much more cautious about going back to work in the right way.
Sameer, since April, we've had the lockdown in a calibrated way, isn't it? It's not a nationwide lockdown that came into place like we experienced last year. Did that make it easier to keep production going? May not be for applause, but in general for the film and show industry, TV industry?
Well, different people did different things. So like the TV industry, for example, because they make daily soaps and, sort of set-based programs, a lot of them relocated to resorts in Daman and Diu and, places like that. And they created their own bio bubbles, and they've been working there quite successfully. I mean, give or take. A lot of us also made plans to, move out of Bombay and shoot elsewhere. But then as we quickly discovered that, the virus spread everywhere. So like a couple of months back, we seriously thought that we would be able to shoot through the summers in other parts of India, even though Bombay and Delhi were going through a real crisis. But now 2 months on, Bombay seems to be on its road to recovery, and other parts of the country are, have challenges. And I think now it's sort of uniformly settled to the fact that wherever we shoot, we will have to, figure out this whole vaccination and the protocols. I mean, that is now a reality. So whether it's an indoor shoot or a location, I mean, we had cases for something we were doing in Kashmir, and this is like, in early March. So, I mean, that was then. So now as we go forward, I think we are looking at it quite seriously. It is possible to shoot in locations, I mean, people are finding ways around it, and we are a creative industry.
Yeah.
And it is, a world of make-believe. So you shouldn't really be sort of, imprisoned
World of
by.
make-believe should be able to insulate itself a little bit better from reality is what you're saying. More effectively from reality.
I don't think we can insulate ourselves from reality, but we can definitely make believe a reality, anywhere. So
True.
I think it's possible to do, and we are all thinking about that.
Samir, the demand for content, the demand for, what you produce, whether it's movies or TV shows or OTT shows, has never been higher, right? The consumption has never been higher. You have a captive audience. Will there be, currently the OTTs and TV channels are supplying us with a very, very steady stream of content. There have been pretty regular, sort of launches of shows and movies going online to streaming services. Will this continue, or will the second wave now create a serious break in the supply of content?
I think it will continue. I think, in a sense, through the last break, and even now, I mean, this is proving to be a relatively shorter break as compared to last year. Last year, we were sort of locked down and unable to do stuff between almost March to September.
Yes.
This time around, it's more like a March to July. So in that sense, and plus we are more prepared this time, even though it's harsher.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether there will be a lack of supply. There will obviously be delays, and there will be those gaps in calendars and schedules. But yeah, the adoption has been huge for the streaming services, primarily because everyone's locked up. So that's a large number of people who are being forcibly got a chance to adopt it and get acclimatized to it, and that's good news. It also allows us to tell a lot more stories. The Indian audience, the large Indian audience, has now become exposed to more than just television, which was the mainstay for the last 20 years. So that's been good. And I think the industry per se, I mean, all of us are really like raring to go. As Sid said, you really want to rebound, you want to get back to business. And now that everyone is taking this pandemic seriously, and everyone globally is focusing on vaccine, hopefully this should be something that we can put behind us and get back to work in earnest.
Right. Sid, I want you to talk explicitly about the movie business, because, I was looking at this Vicky Frames report as a place to look at for some data, and you had around 441 films released in 2020 compared to 1,833 films in 2019 in India. I mean, that's a massive drop. Do you see that trend continue, A? B, the fact that movies are going to OTT directly, and thanks to the competition between the streamers, perhaps getting the value that they deserve. But given that theatrical revenues will now continue to be out for some time, do you see lesser movies being made, and do you see smaller budget movies being made?
I actually think the opposite, honestly. I think 2020 and 21 are a bit of an aberration. So the number of releases can't really be taken, into account because cinemas have been shut.
Yeah.
There's been, I mean, thankfully for producers, we had the outlet of the OTT platforms for films that were ready, edited, where your post-production is done and you're just waiting to release it. You had the outlet of being able to go to the streamers and the streamers wanting that content. So it worked out to be a win-win. But there are lots of, big films that have held out and that are waiting for cinemas to reopen because they believe that they created those movies for a theatrical experience and that's what they want to give them.
Those will be a handful of films.
There are actually quite a few. There are quite a few films that are actually waiting for cinemas to reopen. And, you'll see quite a rush for releases as soon as the entire country opens up. But going forward, I actually believe that you're going to be you'll have filmmakers taking bigger and bigger bets on movies because the theatrical experience is something that going forward is going to be it has to draw you in and take you away from your smaller screen at home. And therefore, it has to be cinematic. It has to be larger than life. It has to be something that, will get people to forget the conveniences.
But will less of those films get made? Will less of those films get made, and will more, will smaller, more intimate films get made? For instance, there's been such a spate of fantastic films coming out of Kerala and from the Malayalam film industry, and they are fabulous. So I'm saying, and they're different. They're not sort of realistic, but they're just more intimate, more personal, and the context is definitely smaller. So is that going to happen? For instance, if we look at 1800 plus films or 2000 films as a ballpark figure for the Indian film industry overall, and that was less than 500 in 2020, where do you see that number? Let us say we are back in normal times, sort of normal times.
I think you're going to have to take the aggregate of movies that go straight to streaming and those that go theatrically to be able to come to the total number of movies that are released in a year.
Yes.
And I think going forward, like you said, the more intimate, dramatic, light comedies, things that you can easily watch in the comfort of your home and don't need to go to the cinema to be able to watch, will be viewed much more on streaming platforms. And your bigger ticket blockbusters, big stars, spectacles, period dramas, and even maybe something like horror, slapstick comedy, which you enjoy with a larger audience, will become your more theatrical experiences. And so I think that's the way that the business will go. And it's just great that we have another platform in OTT to be able to give ourselves the opportunity to continue making the smaller films that might otherwise have died away because they were not theatrical experiences anymore.
Samir, do you agree with what Siddharth said? Do you see the number of movies and the scale of movies in terms of the budget spent on them go back to the 1800 and 2000 range that India is known to make before COVID hit us?
No, I agree with Sid. I think that it has to go back to the number of, the 1800 movies and 1800 number of movies and the scale of movies. I think it's really important for that to happen for the theaters to reopen, right? I mean, everyone is writing an obituary of the theaters saying that the theater screen is dead and now, it's all OTT and streaming and the small screen rules and it's much simpler and much cheaper and why don't we do that? But that's not actually a good outcome for the industry. Because theater revenue, which is essentially retail revenue, is a really important revenue stream for the business, and you can't expect the streaming business to sort of compensate for that, for the kind of movies made. So I mean, if the future is to be a streaming future, then I don't think you can make 1800 movies because I don't think everyone will absorb that kind of scale and size and volume, for this. Which is why, I mean, I think a good happy outcome for the industry is you leave 2020 and 21 apart as in, like aberrant years, and then sort of return gradually, but return to a point where the theater business, returns to being a robust and, people are getting out there and doing stuff. And then, of course, the one good thing that has happened out of this whole pandemic is that audiences have been exposed, as you said, Malayalam cinema, Spanish material. We've seen all kinds of different things because we have been locked up in homes and we've sort of experienced it, sampled it and liked it. So that is a good sign because, we are able to tell a lot more stories. You can tell stories which are more ethnic in more local languages and that will sort of open up storytelling for sure. But big movies got to be big movies, theatrical experiences got to be theatrical experiences.
How are your companies, individual companies, how are you as producers, how is your decision making being affected by what is going on right now in terms of what you're commissioning, in terms of the budgets you're looking at, from the business model point of view? Siddharth, and then I'll go to Samir.
Sure. So, at Roy Kapur Films, we've been working across films as well as series. And I think, sort of alluding to what I was saying earlier, the greenlighting decisions now actually are even simpler when it comes to the platform that you're looking at a film, to be able to find itself on. So when you're looking at your big ticket blockbusters that you're envisioning as something of scale, of magnitude, maybe big stars, you are always thinking theatrical. But I think today when we're evaluating concepts that are a little bit more sensitive, more intimate, more dramatic, maybe lighter, but still wonderful stories that we want to tell, it's pretty clear that those are ones that we should maybe look at from a streaming perspective, to start with. And when it comes to series, I think the beauty of the times that we're in right now is that you have an outlet to be able to make all kinds of content. I mean, some of the stuff that Sameer has been making, Scam, for example, is spectacular. And that is not something that you would be able to do on the big screen, right? You've got to live with those characters. You have to let them cook, let them evolve. And, they become part of your lives. And so that's a great opportunity for creators now to be able to actually sink their teeth into that form of storytelling. So, I mean, not to sound too wildly optimistic, but I do think that over a period of time, once we ride this out, there is going to be quite a boom for the business.
So your business model remains the same. Do you need to relook that? Are you seriously looking at budgets and what you're commissioning and how you're commissioning? I'm saying because every other industry seems to have had to do a big shift in order to deal with the post-COVID world. Do you have to do that as well?
One thing that has happened to consumers, at least that's what I feel, I'm not so sure, but we're still trying to figure it out, is that I think consumers have become a little more thoughtful. The last 2 years has been, sort of a funny experience, and it's made people look inwards, think a lot more. So maybe, some of the mindless stuff that we did in the past and got away with may not, work as well or as easily. Also, all of last year has shown that, all the kind of content that has been put out on the OTT platforms has been more appreciated than all the, the big ticket films, so to say, that got released on the same platforms. Of course, they are not different mediums, and, theater experience is different, and something on a streamer is different. But these things have happened, and there has been a sort of a push from a consumer towards, more authentic stories, bigger ensemble casts. The way to look at it is that a lot of the stuff that we are doing today is something we've never done before, right? So, I mean, till 2016, 2017, none of what we have done today is even happened before. So this is actually nascent times for the industry. It's not a decadent time where we've got to change what we're doing.
One thing I wanted to add to that also is that, a lot of industries have had to deal with a drop in demand, right? Because of what's happened with the pandemic, because of the sort of environment that they're in. I think ironically, our business is actually looking at a boom in demand. And that's why probably we're not being able to give you answers about changing our business models, etc. Because we happen to be at that point where there's an inflection, and the usage of data, the number of hours that people are actually watching entertainment compared to earlier has actually gone through a boom, which is why we see these couple of years as aberrations, and we're on the cusp of that huge growth. Again, this is all hopeful and optimistic.
But I guess that's the only way to be able to cope with what we've all experienced collectively and individually, isn't it? Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Sameer. I wish you and your teams a lot of good luck. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. We'll be back with another conversation next week. But in the meantime, stay tuned to CNBC TV 18.